happen with Brexit.
Yes.
People may now have a second opinion, and they may now be sort of on the side of not
Yes.
wanting to break away from the European Union.
Yes.
My position is that we've had the vote, we've decided, and really we have to now make the best of that decision. If, and I put it out there, if in 2018 by some means there is another referendum, I suspect it will only come as a consequence of another election. Then the people can have the opportunity to vote again. But right now, I think that the government have to do all they can to get the best deal possible, because that's what the public voted for.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, that is just a part of Brexit, because we'll be touching back on that. We're just moving swiftly on. Now, Syria, okay, this is maybe an international thing. Well, it's international stuff, you know. There's still being whereby the missile strike, where President Trump, one of the things that President Trump said when he was going into office, he said, what about this element of surprise? The element of surprise whereby people do not know what they're going to do next. And he ordered 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles to be fired at airbase in Syria. And there's this power struggle now. So we're back on the Trump factor there, because this is what with the power struggle with Russia, with Putin. Because Putin is somewhat in bed with Syria.
Well, I mean, just before we touch on that point, I mean, obviously, clearly, there is also the Russian influence, which is a thread throughout 2017 also, which was to do with all of the supposed election rigging. So Russia has always been in the background to some shape or form in some of these areas. But getting back to your point specifically with Syria, I mean, this is a really sad story, Syria. And again, this is an international issue, not one that relates to us at home per se, but one that I think we all are very sensitive to, because we see the pictures on the TV of the children and the devastation and the number of years this has been going on now. And really, I think it's the responsibility of the UN and other leading nations to really look at this as a whole and bring some sort of an conclusion to this, because the suffering of the people in those areas, regardless of Donald Trump launching his strike to show his authority.
But that was in response to the Syrian attack, the gas attack.
That was, and but that was also that was his red line. Just like Mr. Obama said, he had a red line, and then there was no action.
Red line keep passing.
Kept passing. So obviously, I think Donald Trump wanted to sort of show his authority and say, well, if I say there's a red line, there's a red line. But simply throwing a few bombs into an already toxic situation doesn't actually solve the overall problem. And I think what people would like to see, both at home and abroad, is really some sort of a resolution to a story which has been quite devastating to the lives and families of Syrian people for a number of years now. And
we have seen the devastating impact in Aleppo, for argument's sake, the one which was being used a lot with Hillary Clinton at the time. Let's hope that really resolves itself, because at the end of the day, I believe the president is Sharif, whatever his name is, Assad.
President Assad from Syria.
Yeah. I think the Russians have now pulled out or whatever, and it's Anthony. The funny thing about it is this: Gaddafi, the strong man, they pull him out, and Libya is in turmoil. Saddam, the strong man, they pull out. And I believe they recognize now and say, hang on a second, let's keep this Assad guy. Because if anything, what's going to happen is that Syria will completely go into another turmoil. And in the Middle East now will be completely toxic.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is the reason why the Middle East, with all of the, we're going to touch on some of the terrorist attacks in a sec, but, the Middle East is, as we now know, is where some of these terrorists have originated from, in terms of ISIL or ISIS, however they're pronounced now, and and some of the other previous incarnations, such as what was the other noticeable people who used to carry out those sort of atrocities. To be honest, I've forgotten the different names and organisations that they call themselves. So that area is an area where, as you say, in the past, when there were so-called strong men, dictators, there was control. And it does seem to have been lost. And maybe that is the reason why they're keen to keep Assad in power. However, I think, as I'm just to reiterate, keeping him in power is one thing, but killing of human lives, innocent people, really ought to be the real issue in terms of trying to resolve and to avoid that going forward, because it can't go on indefinitely.
Or it could be, say, are we trying to say the West has its own way of how the world should be run, so therefore it is want to impose its level of democracy on the nations in the Middle East, which don't operate like that, because they do not trouble Saudi Arabia, they don't trouble all those other places.
Yes, and I think that's you're right on that one, Silver. And I think really that's a topic maybe we could spend a good few hours talking about, in terms of what the West's real influence is and what they want from their association in supporting some of these regimes. Because don't forget, at the end of the day as well, we are supplying the arms. UK is one of the countries that supplies arms to these countries, and so we're just as implicit as the people who are doing the killing themselves. So we have to sort of, really get our own house in order and really look at what it is we're trying to do in the world, in those sort of countries, so that we don't cause the situation to become worse than what it actually is.
Yeah. And fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much again for joining us on Late One with SYLBOURNE at an earlier time at 8 o'clock. Looking back at some of the big news of the year as we're going into 2018, and with Anthony Francis, resident guest who do all the different surveys. Anthony, Manchester, in May, terrorist attack, 22nd of May, Ariana Grande concert, Manchester Arena, killing 22 people, injuring hundreds of other, many of them children.
Yeah, I mean, really, I don't think you can find words to describe that atrocity.
Yes.
I mean, you've got young children with their families going to an everyday concert, and really to have an incident like that take place, for somewhere like that to be targeted.
Yes.
Anywhere to be targeted is wrong, but for it to be done in such a devastating and indiscriminate way, really, I think beggared belief. And you can see that I'm struggling for words to really comprehend why somebody would do such a thing. And you just have to take your hat off to the brave services, men and women who actually risk their lives in going to rescue and help people, and also the people who were in the stadium at the time who were helping each other. Absolutely unbelievable situation, and again, an atrocity that no one expected to take place in this country.
And one of the things, though, I was watching it on the news, and they keep showing some pictures of like parents standing out there waiting for their children as well, which was very devastating. But one has to ask the question, what can really, and it's always a question that everyone asks, what can really motivate persons to really, you see, it's not as if you're going for the leaders or the army, but you're actually going for vulnerable people.
Well, I think what these organisations are all about, they're about creating fear amongst the people in general. What they want to do is disrupt our way of life. They want us to be. They want to instill that fear. They know they potentially can't hit the real leaders of the countries, but they know they can go for what I suppose is termed a soft target.
Yes.
And by doing that, they create this fear that people now walk around in their daily lives wondering, should I be going here? Should I be taking my daughter or children there? And what they are trying to do is really disrupt our sort of normal way of life.
Yes.
And I think that's the reason why the young lady whose concert it was, Ariana Grande, I think she was really commendable for coming back and showing her support. Because let's face it, I mean, she's a young girl herself, and to have a concert ruined by such an atrocity, it leaves lasting effects. And really, I think that's why I think these organisations target these type of targets, because they're soft targets and they're trying to disrupt our way of life. And to stop us going about our normal day-to-day business. And
I think she raised 10 million for the victims, and she came back a couple of weeks later with some different stars and everything like that. It's when you think about these gathering now, I know people are thinking about places of where they should go together. I mean, for the new year, I believe the government is actually, or the security services are actually still, I think they're going to do it now, but they were still wondering, should they have this big, massive fireworks, all the people in the city of London.
Well, yeah, and I think this is exactly the reason why these soft targets are targeted, because they instill this fear.
Yeah.
They try to disrupt our way of life. They want to stop our normal democracy. They want to instill fear that makes us not go and do the things we want. Why should an organisation like that, who is simply around killing, stop us from enjoying ourselves and going about our business and actually celebrating the things that we feel are dear and passionate about? So, you know, whether it's going to a concert, going to a cricket match, a football match, or going to an end of year celebration, we shouldn't feel that we can't do so because of the motives of people elsewhere who come out of the shadows and, you know, bring their devastation and fear to us. And really, you know, and their motive is based on what? You know, I don't know what their ideology is. I have no idea what their motives are. And quite frankly, you know, I don't want to know. All I want them to do is I would like somehow for there to be some way we could seek out these people and just allow all countries to go about their normal daily activities without fear from these sorts of people coming out and striking a devastation to people's lives for no reason.
And of course, we'll touch on the London Bridge after, but ladies and gentlemen, we're going on this in month-by-month sequence, so it will tally up back at the same time. In June, ladies and gentlemen, we had the situation whereby Donald Trump again, of course, got to mention because he plays a big part in the Paris Climate Accord, you know, where he's saying, let's get out of this, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to take my glasses off for this one because really... We've heard so much recently about climate change. We've seen, perhaps some of us have seen the effects when we've gone abroad, or if we do travel to places where, you know, before there used to be loads of coral, or, you know, we've seen changes in the weather, etc., etc. And really, I think what Donald Trump has done there was, again, whether or not it's posturing or wanting to show America first, I don't know, but clearly that type of policy was one that would benefit the world in terms of just looking after the environment,
or looking after your
that looks after us, and to sort of throw a spanner in the works by saying, you know, we're not interested in being part of it anymore, really is quite damaging. But what was pleasing was the other countries decided, well, if you're not interested, we're going to continue.
Yeah, we're still going.
So I think that was the positive outcome of that. They didn't capitulate and suddenly say, right, okay, if America aren't involved, then we're not going to continue. They've said we're going to continue. But it just means that America are one of the most excessive uses of carbon coal. And, you know, so therefore, if they're not reducing their output, it does, in a sense, mitigate a little bit against what we're trying to do globally. But certainly, I didn't think that was a wise move by Mr. Trump.
Well, one of the things, one of the arguments for it, what Trump and the political party is saying is that the cost to the American people and the disadvantage to the US to benefit other countries and cause vastly diminished economic production. So therefore, he's looking at it from a perspective of the same insular, America first, looking at the 61 million people based on the fact that he said this is what he's going to do, and he's actually delivering on some of these things.
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, Donald Trump is about face saving. Let's put it out there. I mean, he doesn't want to lose face in terms of some of the things that he's said he was going to do. He said he's going to build a wall. That wall hasn't happened. He said he was going to disrupt Obamacare. He didn't get his vote there. You know, he said he was going to pull out of the climate accord. He's done that. So to me, it's more around face saving than actually having a cohesive strategy for what next. So yes, he may be putting America first, but if the people and the citizens over there are seeing climate change, they're seeing, as we're seeing in places like India, where people are having to wear masks just to go to a cricket match,
or where you see a polar bear almost dying. In that.
If the people in America are struggling with getting respiratory ailments because of his America first and not, then you have to weigh out the pros and cons and say, well, what's the benefit?
Yes, and of course, as we rightly said a while ago, it was really condemned by the world leaders and everything.
Everyone's
going to move forward and stuff like that. So that was that. But in the same month again, we had another terror attack, and this was the London Bridge.
Yeah, and this was another indiscriminate event where people were being randomly mowed down in the street around London Bridge and Borough, and again, what...
That was the stabbing one. That's what
the stabbing one, yeah.
Said about stabbing the revelers, yes.
And the thing is, again, these are people who are carrying out these activities, atrocities, indiscriminately. I mean, there's no way that somebody in a bar or having a drink can mitigate for somebody coming in and acting in that way.
Yes.
And the same way, if you're walking along the street, how many times we've all walked down the roads, you know, do we always have to look back to see if somebody's going to try and mow us down? We've seen now bollards put up in different main walkways,
because there's bollards. I mean, on Westminster Bridge now,
there is.
If you notice, vehicles cannot drive over to the pedestrians now because they put up this bit there.
So again, I mean, yes, that has actually changed a little bit of how people walk on the street. I mean, I've been with friends out on who are walking out in London, and I've heard one or two people say to me, "I don't want to walk too close to next to the roads."
The road.
And that is actually changing people's behaviour.
Perception and behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back a few years ago when there were people who I had friends who were Asian who were used to wear a rucksack to work, and then suddenly, because of all the events around, you know, the tube bombings and the stuff, they stopped wearing rucksacks. Because
if something happens, they'll be targeted by the security services. Yes.
So and so it did change various people's behaviour. But again, these have been really terrible events, terrorist events, and don't forget that you know, it also happened in other European countries.
Yeah, it was
happened in other countries. And they've had to also deal with these indiscriminate events, which again have been awful. And I think it's just by the European countries standing firm with each other and helping each other out to try and identify who these people are, which has been so crucial to us actually trying to get some arrests.
Yeah. But it's interesting how we have actually got to think how we operate now by walking on the road and everything like that, looking behind you, but also according to the mindset of a terrorist now, what they're doing, because they realize they cannot get into the cockpit of the plane, they cannot reach to the top people, so they're actually going for the soft target, as we say, but they're also using weapons as vehicles.
Yes, and I did see in one of the Times cartoon drawings this year. He I forget the gentleman's name. He did his review of 2012 in terms of cartoon images, and one of them was actually where he had 3 guns, lethal weapon, and the 4th one was a car.
Yeah.
Highlighting the fact that how things have now, as you say, the terrorists are now having to find other ways to create carnage. I mean, we've seen it with the lorry attacks that have taken place. And these are things that we never thought possible a few years ago. I think really what started it all was the 9/11 attacks with the aeroplanes. That really changed the whole dynamic in terms of terrorists trying to find other ways to hit their targets.
Well, can I tell you something else which happened? In Oxford Street, there was a false alarm about apparently some gunshots. And there's a massive stampede. And people got hurt, not because of the gun or the shots or whatever, because of the stampede. A flashback to Hillsborough. Then last week again, there was something similar again, and there was the same sort of panic by the people. So I was listening to LBC, ladies and gentlemen, and what the discussion came up about is that if we're not smart, the terrorists could be using the people against the people as a weapon.
Well,
I mean, that just really blowed my mind when it came up, whereby the stampede factor, because using false alarm.
Yeah.
But because people are so very perceptive now.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Selborne. I mean, I hadn't even thought about it like that. But yes, I mean, you know, things that we took for granted before, walking down the road, going to a concert, drinking in a bar, even going on our summer holidays.
Yes.
These are all, and even actually being on the beach. Was it?
Oh yes, Bali. Was it Bali or something? Well, somewhere in the Middle East.
I think one of the holiday destinations where one of the gunmen literally went on the beach. So, you know, clearly our way of life is being disrupted by these individuals, and they're doing it in a way, as you say, to try and find the sort of softer targets.
Yes.
And it is making us change. I would just say, Selborne, that a number of years ago, and I don't know if any of our listeners will remember this, but a number of years ago, we did have an attack on our milk, and somebody was putting products into baby food a number of years back. And as a
I wasn't born yet. Sorry, go on.
But as a consequence of that particular action, the milk companies now, you've probably all seen it, they have put that sealant on the top.
Okay.
So as a consequence of that particular terror attack where somebody was going around putting, I think it was glass in baby food and doing something like that, you now find that all of those products, like baby food, like milk, there's a sealant that you have to pull off the top in order to then get access to show that it hasn't been tampered with. And that was a direct consequence of that particular incident happening all those years ago. So maybe, you know, these things, even though we don't want them to happen, maybe we can take some good in terms of how we go around our day-to-day business so that we can protect ourselves better in the future.
So the song by Lou Rawls is that, "Has the world gone mad?" But then Lou Rawls reminds us that nothing is wrong with the world, it's the people that's in it. The world is okay, but it's the people that's in it. And in the same month of June, we had the general election. I think that was the last time we had our show.
And I think, you know, did England go mad? I don't know. Did London go mad? Well, we certainly know what happened there. We had or did Theresa May go mad? By even calling that general election, somebody who was in a comfortable position, had a comfortable majority, and suddenly, for whatever reason, decided to throw it all away, to gamble and risk it for, I'm not really sure what she thought her overall outcome was going to be, but it's now turned out to be a complete disaster.
Yes. I believe that she had believed she would have actually done it, and she would have done it, save for the bad PR doctors who were there in the background. Because if Theresa May did not call that election, it would be a similar situation where Gordon Brown was hounded that you do not have a mandate. Remember we're talking about Theresa May? You do not have a mandate. Even our Prime Minister in Jamaica, the first one when he took over from Bruce Golding, which is Andrew Holness, he was dogged, you do not have a mandate. When the parliamentary system is about the MPs that you vote for, but of course they say the leader doesn't have a mandate. So even if she didn't call that election, she didn't have to, but she would be dogged and dogged and dogged.
Yes, she would have been, and we do know that. However, she came out fighting right at the beginning when she was elected as the Prime Minister, and she categorically said that there will be no general election until 2019. Yes. And I think where she lost faith, and lost face, should I say, was by going back on that decision. People then saw her as being weak, opportunist, and suddenly thought, well, hang on, you said there was no election. Now you're suddenly changing your tune. You know, you're flip-flopping, going backwards and forwards. And
by upsetting Brenda, or that lady that said, not again.
Well, yes, I do know the lady you're talking about, Sylbourne. But I think more importantly, yes, we had that lady say not again, but I think people in general, we had just come out of the referendum, where there was voter fatigue, but I think Theresa May had the majority, she had the mandate, and she had the authority to actually go forward. I think unfortunately all of these politicians fall into the same trap in terms of you've got one or two people who keep poking at them and saying no mandate, and their ego or their, you know, they suddenly
shut up.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where they suddenly say, right, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yes.
And they don't really think, because
she didn't have to.
She did not have to do anything. She said 2019, and I think if she had stuck to that, everything would have been going through as normal.
And Europe would actually give them that level of confidence in the sense that our sort of standing didn't thwart it, because
as a consequence now Europe knows that she's weak,
and they're taking advantage
they're taking advantage. So when they come there to negotiate, they're sort of saying, well, you know, this is how it is. She hasn't got a mandate that she had before with her majority in the House of Lords, in the House of Commons rather. So as a consequence now, you know, they know in a sense that she's, I wouldn't call her a lame duck, but she's certainly a weakened Prime Minister. And she's been taken advantage both by Europe and by Jeremy Corbyn.
And also the DUP, she had to broker a deal with the DUP to prop up the government. And Jeremy Corbyn, who believes he wants to, he believes he won. He believes he won. Well, the popularity, you know.
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, he did. Jeremy Corbyn did perform very well in the general election. You know, he did manage to get out the votes. I think it was, you know, certainly Theresa May didn't do herself any favours by not standing in the debates to actually put her policies across. That certainly didn't help her cause, because it meant that people suddenly said, well, what are you afraid of? you know, put up or shut up. She didn't put up, so therefore people said, okay, well, you've got nothing to say.
And also her people around her, Boris and everybody, were just like in a straitjacket. They couldn't say anything. Everybody was just following this particular line.
Yeah, and I think also what was unfortunate for Theresa May, she kept using the phrase or the you know, the statement, strong and stable leader.
Yes.
And unfortunately, once she lost, that whole narrative became, you know, weak and useless because you know, she didn't have the mandate, she didn't have the authority.
Weak and unstable.
And she's really lost all her authority. So she went from being somebody who was in power to somebody now who, as you say, with the DUP, is actually being held together by you know, a few votes here and there.
But also in the same month, ladies and gentlemen, so many happened in that month because we had the terrible tragedy of the Grenfell Tower fire, whereby on June the 14th, people all over Britain, I mean, we all remember, it is one of those days where we all know where we were at that time. In horror, Grenfell Tower in North Kensington went up in flames. Fire which burned for more than 60 hours caused the death of 71 people. That figure is in dispute, but that was a terrible thing, Anthony.
Yeah, and the Grenfell event really was shocking. It was a wake-up call for the country, and I'm sure once the debates and all of the sort of discussions take place and the investigations take place and the findings that are now in train, I'm pretty sure will also change the building model in terms of the building structure.
The cladding and
all of the sort of guidelines for buildings going forward will have to change because, and I think we're seeing them done retrospectively anyway, with councils looking back on their stock and sort of looking to see, you know, what have we got out there which might cause a problem. But you're right, I mean, it was something that I used to live in a council block similar to that in Kennington many years ago, and no one would think anything about cladding or anything like that. I have to say as well though, the block that I lived in didn't have sprinklers.
Yes.
It didn't have fire wardens. It didn't have anything like that. So we didn't have any sort of regular fire drills.
Yes.
So you know, a lot of the things that you would normally take for granted in normal business blocks, where they have an annual fire check, they have fire drills where everyone has to come out of the building. None of these things take place in general blocks today.
Yes.
So hopefully, as a consequence of Grenfell, we will see much better security around and governance around how these buildings are managed, and also have regular fire safety checks and evacuation, so at least people know what to do in the event of something that you know, similar happening again in the future.
So a better behaviour as to how things are, because I went down to Grenfell a few days after, and it was an eerie feeling, I must say. Lots of people walking around, people looking for their families or friends, just looking at maybe somebody. But it was an eerie feeling. And one of the things, Anthony, for me personally, was when I looked up at the building, and I think I was leaving in the evening, and you could actually visualize the eyes of people looking out, believing that they were going to be rescued by the police or the fire brigade and the helicopter up the top, because even with the inquiry, they're even saying that that helicopter which was at the top, some are saying it fanned the flame as well. That is what, you know. So, but the point about it is that I just sort of visualize those eyes of persons expecting or hoping, and no, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Grenfell event really is horrific, you know, both from those who have witnessed it and were there and saw the events unfolding in front of them and helpless to do anything, and also for those, sadly, who lost their lives, who were in the building itself and had no means of escape. And, you know, as I say, I just hope that as a consequence of the lessons learned, that there'll be better governance around how these buildings are built in the future in terms of the sort of material they use, but also to make sure that there are regular evacuations or drills, so people know how to exit a building in the event of an emergency. Whether or not individual floors need to have sprinklers or whatever means they need to put in there, I just hope that the overall outcome provides a much safer environment for people to be able to live in their homes without fear that if something like this happens, a fire happens, that they will be trapped in their homes.
But one of the things I'll say though is that people will question whether they should listen to the fire brigade if they say, stay where you are. That's going to be, I mean, that's a reality, Anthony. Whether we like it or not, many people are saying that they just ignore the fire brigade guys and they just say, listen, I'm just getting out. And it's a it's a tricky one.
It is tricky, and you know, I'm not.
We're not experts in this.
I'm not a fire marshal. Yeah. I'm not a fire expert, so I'm not really going to comment too much. My only hope is that the governance around how the sort of safety aspects of those buildings will be tightened up, will be communicated to all those who are living in those apartments. And also in the same way that, as I say, that you have in buildings, office blocks, where are the fire extinguishers? Where are the fire exits? How do you get out? How do you raise the alarm? I mean, I don't know, in the Grenfell incident, was an alarm raised that allowed people to know there was a fire? Is there a tannoy system? And also maybe just a third means of escape, which was separate. So these are the sorts of things that I'm pretty sure the findings in the inquiry will give some guidelines on. But in terms of your question around someone being told by the police or the fire brigade to stay or not, ultimately people will react in a way that human nature is, and they'll want to protect themselves and they'll want to get out.
And of course, the inquiry is going on. I don't think we're going to touch on that anymore. So we can just say there's an inquiry which is going on now, and we hope the findings will come to place. And there are issues about the makeup of the judge panel, but that's where it's at now, and we just have to follow through with that process when it comes. In July, I mean, just quickly, we're going to move on quickly because time is going, and we're just in July.
Wow.
But North Korea again, which is in the frame because, of course, that's crucial. Because the question people are asking now is this, Anthony, actually. If North Korea can launch missiles now, which is going across the world, and if Trump then go back there now, we're now caught in the middle of a possibility for nuclear war.
Yeah, and I think, I know we're in July, we need to move on, but I think clearly we're in a really sensitive situation here. I think this is going to be one of these situations where hopefully diplomacy will see itself through, and we won't be in a situation where somebody presses a button inadvertently simply because they want to be seen as the
top guy.
They're the top man, the big cheese, whatever it is. Because we're talking about a real consequence of actions here. So my prayers and hopes are that the North Korean Kim Jong-un will calm down, if that's the right word to use. There'll be better dialogue between him and the West in terms of Mr. Trump, President Trump, and that this sort of explosive words are going backwards and forth will cease to be so high in terms of rhetoric, and that we can get back to a more business-like dialogue where the threat of a nuclear war isn't so imminent, and that we don't have to sort of feel so threatened. Because as you say, the last thing we want is for that to happen. And we all know what the consequences are if we have a nuclear war. One person fires one missile, someone fires it, and then we're all in.
And then Russia said they got to get involved, and everybody.
And then it's game over.
That's it. Well, we are now in August, and we had a massive eclipse. August the 21st. I don't know if you saw it. I was falling asleep or something like that.
Well, it's you have to remember those eclipses don't happen too often. So the fact that you just fell asleep.
I don't know where I was, but I know. Actually, I was at the office and the place was black. No, that was when there was this massive.
That was a few months ago.
Yeah, that was a cover. Yeah.
No, well, I think the main thing about that one is it's an event that happens once in a lifetime, once in a generation. If you're lucky enough to. Few viewers out there who perhaps were somewhere where they saw that, I think it's an experience, but certainly wasn't one that I actually witnessed. But I certainly do look at those type of things that happen, and I marvel at them because they happen once in a generation.
And also during that, it was like some act of God was happening. Natural disasters. There was a Hurricane Harvey. 4 days after that, U.S. as a category. I mean, that was really going on. Killing at least 90 people in total. Costing just shy of 200 billion, and then the Caribbean. It was going through the Caribbean.
Yes, and I think that's really the story that takes us into the summer, the hurricanes, and if we ever wanted proof potentially of the effects of global warming, could we perhaps use that as an example. Some people may say, well, there are hurricanes every year in the Caribbean, or every year in certain parts of America, and that we shouldn't, you know, put two and two together. But certainly that was a really devastating situation in the park.
And of course it moved from August into September, where it got into Irma and Maria. Why don't they have a hurricane, Anthony? Or hurricane SYLBOURNE?
I don't want to... I was wondering what you were going to say. That.
Where do they get these names from, Anthony?
I don't know where they get them from, but I don't want a hurricane to be named after me. I don't want to be responsible for people thinking, you know, it was the year when your name caused all this devastation.
What about a hurricane Babatunda or something like that, you know? But anyhow, we were just having that discussion one time. Where do they get these names from? But yeah, the hurricanes have been very very dangerous, and
well, they have been, and I think we need to just, you know, you touched on the Caribbean. I mean, you know, we all saw the devastation in the Caribbean. You know, places like Dominica.
Yeah.
You know, I have some very close friends who have been working with the Dominican government through their consulate in the UK to try and provide some support and aid to the people out there, because the island was devastated.
Yes.
And I think what I find quite sad is that when the spotlight is on the Caribbean or Dominica in that incident, and people see all the devastation, another news story comes along, and then that story is forgotten about.
Yes, yes.
And those people are still having to sort of go through and rebuild their lives without the TV, without the so-called, you know, the news media focusing in to try and give them that support where people can continue to give money or indeed subsistence to help out. So I always find it interesting that, unfortunately, maybe just because of the way of the world and events happen, something else comes along and takes the place.
They call it a 9-day wonder, but also Donald Trump as well with the Puerto Rico issue. That was something which actually took the spotlight off the other nations as well, because they were saying, how comes America was so slow? And there was this tiff between the mayor of Puerto Rico or whatever like that and Trump. Anyhow, but it was just crazy. Yeah.
Well, we had the same thing here as well. You know, why was Britain so slow to react? To get out there, and you know, and let's face it, we saw the infrastructure in Dominica when the hurricane came through.
Yes.
It's easy for someone to say, why didn't someone do something?
Yes.
I mean, where the plane's going to land was one of the things when I saw the devastation. How do you get the infrastructure? How do you build back an infrastructure which has suddenly been decimated like that? So it's all well and good for people to say that there was an adequate response, but I think you have to put it in the context of when you see the overall devastation.
Yes.
There has to be some background planning so that when they do go out there, they can hit the ground running.
And the UK had its own as well. The UK had its own in October, whereby you had the British Isles were barred by torrential rain. But these are really nothing much, I must say. I know the UK like to get involved with these things, but it wasn't anything big, was it, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Look, we just had a few days of snow, and as usual, you know, in November, and suddenly the whole country comes to a halt.
Yeah.
You know, it's the usual thing. You know, no one buys winter tires.
Yeah.
There's no de-icers out on the roads or adequately positioned. So you wonder why it is that a bit of snow or a bit of rain and suddenly the country comes to a halt.
Well, 3 people still were killed during the storm in the UK, I must say. Sorry about that. But and we go back to the States, because October the 1st, 58 people were killed when at another concert with Stephen Paddock opened fire. Crowd of concert goers from a hotel room in Las Vegas. That's the other thing again, which we went back earlier when we were talking about concerts, people gathering together, like going for soft targets. But this is now the issue about, was he a terrorist or was he not a terrorist? That's the American sort of thing now. If they're looking for a name, an Asian name, a black name, but it was actually...
Yeah, I think Trump was looking for an Asian name, a black, or any sort of name that wasn't American, so that he could put his, you know...
his spin on it, yeah.
He could then put his narrative around it, but unfortunately, it was a US citizen, but I think what that whole incident reignited, sadly, is the whole thing around gun control.
Yes.
And you know, the sad thing is, SYLBOURNE, is that was a devastating event that took place with so many people being killed indiscriminately for no reason. But will there be a change in the gun law in the US, or will there be another incident that we will look on again in 2018 and say, what an atrocity that's happened? sadly, the US seemed to, look what President Trump's response was. If there was more guns, they could have perhaps shot the person. Even when there was the incident, another incident that took place in the US, where again President Trump said what was required was it wasn't the gunmen, it was more guns that were needed.
More guns, yeah.
And when you have that sort of narrative, it makes me sad that a country that's meant to be the leader of the free nation almost seems to be killing themselves and can't see that's happening. And
some videos sort of supporting that narrative was they were using some videos whereby people actually went out and killed like attackers on some different incident to say if it wasn't for that good American citizen with his gun, that man could have killed many more. And they've been using that sort of narrative for the
Well, Selborne, look, we only have to look back at the US senator who got shot, the lady who got shot in the head.
In the head, yes.
Right now, so it was brought right home to Congress. The US senator, pardon me, I've forgotten the lady's name. She was shot.
Yes.
But did it change anything?
No.
Nothing changed.
Yeah.
Sadly.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up. But before we go, I think one of the big ones in November was Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And I was fortunate to have one of the present deputy finance minister of Zimbabwe, who was MP Terence Mukupo, the night before the Mugabe resigned. And it was a very interesting discussion. But the whole aspect of Africa and how did Africa reach to where it's at? Where did the breadbasket of Africa, which is Zimbabwe, reach to this point now whereby you've got a leader at such age?
Yeah, and really we could have we could discuss on this for hours. But I think the positive thing is you're right. I mean, you had a situation where you had one person was in power for 37 years.
Yes.
I've visited Zimbabwe myself, and I remember when I was in the country, all you could see from every pillar to post was pictures of Mr. Robert Mugabe.
Yeah.
And you're right, it was the breadbasket of the world. Why has that region become so poor?
Yeah.
We could discuss that and debate it for hours.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is they've got a new leader,
yes,
and let's hope that the new leader and the new government makes the changes that will aid the people and restore that part of the world to the prosperity that it deserves. And just in closing on a positive note about the Africa region, we've got the recent election of George Weah, the ex Ballon d'Or Footballer of the Year, who's just become the president of Liberia.
Oh yeah, he became it. Okay,
and he became president of Liberia. And again,
the youngest one,
so 51, George Weah. So again, he was voted in on a populist vote by the young people or the younger generation because they want to see change. Liberia is a poor country. George Weah himself came from a really poor, impoverished background and has reached really high international heights in terms of when he was a footballer, and he spent the last 12 years trying to make a difference in Liberia. He hasn't just suddenly pitched up and, in the last few years, he's been consistent in terms of his dealings there. So let's just hope that in 2018 we see that nation, that part of the continent, regenerate itself and become as prosperous for the people as the Western world take for granted.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much, but we finish on two last ones. And the two last one is, there's two. One is controversial, but one is very great. And the first one is Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which created a turmoil. And we're just letting it land right there.
Yeah, we'll just leave that.
But the positive note is Prince Harry and Meghan is now engaged, and we may have a holiday next year. we have a holiday next year, maybe.
and on that note, I mean, I've got to say first of all, I've got to say congratulations to Prince Harry and to Meghan.
Yeah.
I think Prince Harry has shown himself to be somebody who is his own man.
Yes.
He's clearly found someone who he's happy with, and I wish them well.
Well, for him to show himself the main man, he's got to make sure that he invites President Obama. And we're going to see if he's the real main man or if the Queen is in charge. We got dark forces around here.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. Let's just wish our viewers all the best for 2018.
Yes.
We wish you continued support of the SYLBOURNE Show.
Yes.
Thank you, SYLBOURNE, for having me.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
And as I say, I wish everyone well for 2018, and let's see what happens in terms of the events next year.
Yes, and thank you so much again, and please share this video, and you know, all the best. And of course, you can actually send a message through or put it on what is your top news of the year as well. And watch the last 2 shows which I have with Paula Perry and also with Sheila Farrell. There's 2 prizes which is in there. You've got to answer the questions from them and you'll get a prize. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and have a happy new year 2018. And my word for 2018 is this: going for gold. To go for gold, you got to be like Usain Bolt. You got to spend years of training. And all those years of 2015, 2016, 2017, that's years of training. So don't just run away to say, I can't wait for 2017 to finish. No, that was training. But 2018 is going for gold because you're going to attain your goal, G-O-A-L. So gold to get your G-O-A-L. Oh, that sounds.
On that note,
peace out. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on YouTube. Fantastic. Thank you very much on YouTube. Okay, let me see why I stop this. I never know to stop this one.